July 1944. Democratic Convention. Franklin Roosevelt is picking his running mate for a fourth term. Everyone expects Henry Wallace, the sitting vice president. Roosevelt chooses Harry Truman instead. Wallace is devastated. 4 years later, he'll run against Truman for president. With Stalin's secret support. And destroy his own legacy. Henry Wallace. Iowa farmer's son. Agricultural scientist. Secretary of Agriculture under FDR. Vice President 1941 to 1945. Progressive champion. Supporter of civil rights, labor unions, anti-colonialism. Visionary who spoke about the century of the common man. Popular. Idealistic. And completely naive about Soviet communism. Democratic Party bosses hated Wallace. Too liberal. Too sympathetic to Soviets. Too idealistic. They told FDR, Wallace will cost us the election. Roosevelt was dying. Tired. He gave in. Chose boring, moderate Harry Truman instead. Wallace felt betrayed. Humiliated. His resentment began. April 12, 1945. FDR dies. Harry Truman, Vice President for only 82 days, becomes president. He's unprepared. Knows nothing about the atomic bomb. Nothing about Yalta agreements. Nothing about Soviet intentions. Wallace watches, thinking I should be president. I would do better. Truman kept Wallace in the cabinet. Secretary of Commerce. A gesture of party unity. But Wallace used the position to undermine Truman. He gave speeches criticizing Truman's foreign policy. Publicly. Frequently. Saying America was too aggressive towards Soviets. Too militaristic. Truman tolerated it. At first. September 20, 1946. Wallace gave a speech attacking Truman's policy towards Soviet Union. Called for cooperation with Stalin. Undermined Secretary of State. Truman had enough. Fired Wallace. The former vice president was out. His bitterness turned into rage. And a plan for revenge. Wallace decided to run for president. Third Party. Progressive Party. 1948 campaign against Truman. His platform, end the Cold War, cooperate with Soviets, civil rights, universal health care, anti-imperialism. Good policies. But there was a problem. The Communist Party was secretly running his campaign. The American Communist Party saw Wallace as useful. They infiltrated his campaign. Volunteers. Organizers. Speechwriters. Wallace knew. He didn't care. He thought he was using them. Reality. They were using him. Stalin wanted Truman to lose. Wallace was the tool. A naive, bitter tool. Wallace attacked Truman relentlessly. Called him warmonger. Fascist. Imperialist. Said Truman was starting World War III. Some criticisms were valid. Truman's policies were aggressive. But Wallace's rhetoric was extreme. Unhinged. He sounded like Soviet propaganda. Because sometimes, it literally was. Wallace did one genuinely brave thing. He campaigned in the segregated South. With integrated rallies. Blacks and whites together. He was pelted with eggs. Tomatoes. Threatened. But he didn't back down. On civil rights, Wallace was ahead of his time. Courageous. Principled. Republicans and Democrats called Wallace a communist. Red baiter tactics. Guilt by association. But Wallace made it easy. He refused to denounce Soviet Union. Refused to criticize Stalin. Defended Soviet expansion. His naivete looked like treason. His idealism looked like stupidity. February 1948. Soviet-backed coup in Czechoslovakia. Communists seized power. Democracy crushed. Wallace's response? He blamed America. Said we provoked it? American liberals abandoned him in droves. His campaign collapsed. He'd chosen the wrong side. At exactly the wrong moment. Wallace was smeared unfairly. But he also earned the criticism. He wasn't a communist. But he enabled them. He wasn't a Soviet agent. But he advanced Soviet interests. He wasn't a traitor. But his judgment was catastrophically bad. Intention doesn't excuse impact. November 2, 1948. Election day. Wallace predicted millions of votes. He got 1.1 million. 2.4% of total. Truman won in upset. Wallace didn't win a single state. Not even close. His campaign was humiliating failure. His political career was over. At 60 years old, Wallace retreated to his farm. Wrote. Experimented with agriculture. Slowly realized he'd been used. By 1950, when Korean War started, he supported Truman. Too late. Nobody cared. He'd burned every bridge. His progressive movement died with his campaign. Years later, Communist Party USA admitted it. They'd infiltrated Wallace's campaign. Used him. Manipulated him. Soviet archives confirmed Stalin supported Wallace to weaken Truman. Wallace had been a pawn. He suspected. But his ego and bitterness blinded him. Pride destroyed his judgment. Here's the uncomfortable truth, Wallace was partly right. Truman's policies did help start the Cold War. America was aggressive toward Soviets. Nuclear monopoly created arrogance. But being right about diagnosis doesn't excuse wrong prescription. You can't cure American imperialism by embracing Soviet totalitarianism. Wallace's story is a warning. Personal grievance destroyed political judgment. He was bitter about being replaced. So he aligned with anyone who opposed Truman. Including communists. Including Stalin. His ego made him vulnerable. Bitterness made him useful to enemies. Resentment destroyed his legacy. Ultimate irony, if Wallace had stayed loyal to Democratic Party, pushed from within, he might have influenced policy. Instead, his rebellion strengthened Truman. Made him look moderate. Wallace's attacks helped Truman win. He accomplished the opposite of his goal. Perfect self-defeat. Henry Wallace could have been president. Should have been president by succession. Instead, bitterness about being replaced consumed him. He spent 2 years destroying Truman. Failed completely. Destroyed himself instead. The lesson isn't about communism or Cold War. It's about how personal resentment kills political movements. How being right means nothing if you align with wrong people. How ego and bitterness turn visionaries into footnotes. Wallace had the right diagnosis of American militarism. But his cure embracing Soviet apologism was worse than the disease. And his motive revenge against Truman poisoned everything. He went from potential president to historical warning. Not because his ideas were all wrong. But because his wounded pride made him stupid. And stupidity, however well-intentioned, serves evil just as effectively as malice. That's the tragedy of Henry Wallace. He could have been great. Instead, he chose to be bitter. And bitterness never wins. Henry Wallace went from vice president to political footnote because bitterness destroyed his judgment. He was right about some things. Wrong about others. But mostly, he was consumed by resentment. And resentment makes you stupid. It makes you ally with your enemies. It makes you destroy yourself trying to hurt someone else. Subscribe for more political stories about how personal grudges destroy movements. Like if you've ever seen someone's ego ruin their cause. Comment: can you be politically right but tactically wrong? Can good intentions excuse bad alliances? Wallace's story says no. Being right doesn't matter if you're doing it for wrong reasons with wrong people. Share this if you know someone whose bitterness is making them politically stupid. Because Wallace's warning is eternal revenge kills movements. Ego destroys legacies. And sometimes the person you hate wins because you're too busy hating them to build something better.